Adam, Lindsay, hi, welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourselves?
My name's Adam Robinson. I'm an occupational therapist currently working at Cygnet Hospital, Sherwood. I've been working for Cygnet for 17 years, 13 of which as a qualified OT. And I worked within the personality disorder services for about 8 years.
My name's Lindsay. I'm an occupational therapist at Cygnet Derby. I work on the female personality disorder ward. I'm also the clinical lead for the PD services. Been working there about 14 years now.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess to start things off today, it might be really nice just to talk about the service line itself. So for anyone listening who isn't aware of that, do you want to just tell people what that looks like for people coming into our personality disorder services? So maybe just a little bit about what those services are, how long people might stay, that kind of information.
So we have got 15 services, so various OTs as a PD service line. Within them services, the security level would range. So we've got medium secure, we've got low secure, we've got high dependency. So the type of individuals that we see, although the diagnosis may be similar, the presenting risks may differ.
And also, males and females. We have forensic services as well as the sort of locked rehab. So when a person comes in, I suppose depending on the service, we'd like to think that there's uniformity across the board. That's what we helped set up, as in so they can all expect a similar journey. How long it lasts obviously is dependent upon the individual and their progression, but it's friendly. We always think trying to help people feel safe is one of the most important things, certainly in the personality disorder services. And then the way I've always worked is from the OT case formulation. So what's meaningful to that person, and then you take that goal as the end goal and you work sort of backwards from there, breaking it down and ultimately trying to get them to see a life outside of hospital. So whenever you get my long-term goal is to leave hospital, and you're like, well, no, that's a medium-term goal because there's life after hospital. So what's after? What do you want to be after that?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got a range of individuals that have come from various backgrounds, and you see that they might lack that kind of hope for the future, or they don't quite know themselves. And actually a big part of the OT process is about exploring them as individuals, exploring their identity, letting them know that they can dream, they can work towards, and they can achieve, and they can move on positively.
Absolutely. Adam, you talked there about the uniformity across the services. We've said there's different services, there's different levels of security within that. Lindsay, you've worked as a clinical lead for those services for a couple of years now, and prior to that, Adam, you were doing the same, weren't you? Do you want to just explain to people how you've created that uniformity and how that's maintained despite those differences?
We've got a model of practice, so that's one of the things that will differ from other services. Is our model of practice will be based on national drivers, what evidence base tells us that this works well with working in personality disordered services, and that might be right from the approach to certain types of staffing levels, and from that we have created that uniform approach which Adam mentions to you about. So for example, the various stages prior to someone being admitted to hospital, when they're admitted, that assessment, that kind of treatment and that review, and trying to then prepare somebody for discharge. So within each of them stages we have got a certain process that we would follow. So we would complete certain assessments, or as part of a review or an outcome, we'd be using certain tools for that. So they're the things that I guess we prescribe, but it's very much down to the occupational therapist in, what they see and how that they would deliver that.
Yeah, so there's still that room for interpretation in terms of using a toolkit, I guess, isn't it?
Still autonomous as a clinician, working within that service line. It's just the process, because, research tells us that that works best with personality disorder, and that's ultimately what we want to achieve.
Yeah. We've spoken a lot in the earlier episodes about the challenges of being an occupational therapist in general, or the challenges specifically within mental health services. And, there is similar challenges in all of those service lines. But it might be nice just to think about what the specific challenges are in personality disorder services, different to other mental health services, perhaps.
I'd say the most important thing, and I suppose the biggest challenge, is the relationship that you build with the person. And certainly as a man working with females, that I suppose was a lot more difficult, or I found it more difficult initially. The longer I was there, I became much more comfortable. But due to, I suppose, some people's backgrounds, some people naturally feared men and working with men, which made it even more important, I suppose, that you setting a positive example, but also very approachable and making people feel safe. So relationship was key for me. But even again, working with men, I always think that if I have a relationship with someone, that I can work with someone, then I can at least try and help them. But if I can't get them to engage with me, then I can't help anyone, if that makes sense.
It's the basis of any intervention, isn't it?
And I think really, more so, or certainly from my experience in the personality disorder services, that relationship is key. And if you don't have that relationship, then you're really going to struggle. And I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, with everyone you work with, is developing that.
And I think, just to add to that as well, because of the nature of personality disorder service, you see a high kind of turnaround with burnout in some services, don't you? So actually that then impacts on relationships, because it sometimes feeds into, some of the services' beliefs that actually, maybe people they're gonna keep leaving me. So that is definitely a challenge that I have seen over the years, is due to maybe the turnaround. It can be difficult for service users.
Yeah. If we look at the other side of that, what are the rewards specific to working with that group?
Oh, it's the complete opposite. It makes it a lot more fun, that you get to know people, and you'd really get to know them, especially as, working with them over a prolonged period.
So how long would somebody stay on average in those services?
About 500 plus days, I think, at a secure level, was the last statistic that I'd read. Around 524, I think it was.
I was just going to say 18 to 24 months, because that was the last statistic I saw.
Governance, they do it in days.
Well, they're both the same.
Yeah.
Or there or thereabouts, aren't they?
Yeah. So you work with them over a longer period of time, and I think being able to interpret what someone's really saying is, I suppose, one of the real benefits. So when you know somebody long enough, you learn their way of communication, which isn't always straightforward, and it may be that you need to sort of pay more attention to the nonverbal, the meta communication and what's actually being said, not the words that are coming out of their mouth, and then being able to recognize that and react to that without having to sort of explore things further, because you know that person, you know what that communication means, so you can act upon it straight away, which from feedback that I've got has always been one of the things that people really like, that they don't have to explain themselves over and over again, that people just get them, if that makes sense.
It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Particularly, like you say, if you've been there for a longer period of time, you feel that you're constantly repeating yourself. That's bound to become extremely frustrating.
I think it's because you're working with them for such a prolonged period of time. The benefits there is you can really employ that holistic approach with someone, and you can be client-centred, and you've got that willingness from the individual in most cases. They do want to improve, they do want to get better, and that with that time becomes that trust, and it ultimately complements the process.
It does. So I know you've spent quite a bit of time, not just you two, the rest of the service line as well, but I know you two have taken quite an active role in writing your chapter for the book. Do you want to maybe just give people an idea of what's in your case study so that they know what to expect?
So within the case study, we have applied the model of practice within the pathways. So the service user that we've spoke about, we have explained each stage of the process. So, for example, prior to that individual being admitted to hospital, how we would approach it as the team receiving that referral would be doing some background reading about that individual, trying to identify what their strengths are, how they've progressed so far. Kind of gives you an idea of, right, so we're here. What's that baseline looking like? What are we going to do on admission? And then when that individual was admitted, we would all do our initial interview, initial assessments, look at being able to identify what their needs are, what their strengths are, the interventions. And then the case study in the book just reflects what interventions we'd used with that individual. And it monitors the journey and the success of that individual.
If someone was thinking about coming to work in personality disorder services, so maybe a student or somebody who'd got experience in a different service line, what advice would you give them? What do you think makes a really quality therapist?
You've got to be, I mean, OTs do harp on about being holistic, but you do have to be very holistic. And everybody is so different. You can't treat people as, two people as the same, even though you do treat people with the same levels of respect, etc. So you've got to have that about you, and you've got to be flexible. You can't, I suppose, expect to go in and, I suppose, prescribe to people. You've got to work with them from their point of view. So you've got to be flexible. You've got to be resilient, because there's a lot of difficulties that comes with, boundaries, and certainly some of the, I suppose, information and situations you may find yourself in can be emotionally quite difficult. You've got to be passionate and sort of not give up. If things aren't, if you're following the OT process and you're sort of getting, I think you're going around in circles a bit. You've just got to persist and keep changing different things, trying new things.
Not be on your own as well, I guess. You've got that service line there, that they're not there just to say, you need to do this work, that work, I need this information. You're there to help each other, aren't you? You're gonna come across tricky times. You're gonna come across brilliant times. And it's about sharing them both equally.
And having that support there, isn't it, from other people who understand where you're coming from, rather than just a generic group of clinicians.
Yeah, reflective practice. Like I said, I touched on kind of the burnout rate. You see like huge compassion fatigue within our area, and you need to be quite insightful to see, recognise the signs of it coming up on you, if ever, or, on colleagues, or if you're a management of a team, look out for things like that as well.
And what would you look out for, Lindsay? What would you say those signs were?
I would definitely say frustration with the job, an avoidance of certain situations, someone's attitude in how they would speak about an individual in their care or the service as a whole. Or if you ever see any negativity in there, you've got an idea that there's something possibly going on. You might want to explore it a little bit further. Sometimes it just creeps up on people, doesn't it?
And then in terms of supporting someone, what would you have any recommendations for how best to support someone, or to be aware of for yourself if you're starting to see those signs?
I think definitely try to support an individual in recognising where that's maybe coming from. Is it a particular process? Is it a particular part of the job? Is it a particular person, for example? Is it a lack of understanding, but yet anxiety because they're not wanting to get support with that? I think that's the best way. If it was myself, I think it would be monitoring your professional and your personal life. It may be that you're managing well at work, but then personally, then frustrations are coming in, or, difficulty with motivation in your personal life. So I think you do very much need to watch both sides of it.
Yeah, I think your own well-being as a practitioner is so important, isn't it? You're not able to support other people unless you're in that position yourself.
That self-compassion as well, you need that.
Definitely.
You need to be able to do nice things.
One of the things we've talked about, again, in some of the other podcasts is how sensory strategies are emerging in more and more services in occupational therapy, and sometimes services where historically they've not been applied. do you want to talk about if sensory strategies have been introduced within your services and how you've found that, what impact they might have had?
Almost everyone nowadays, or certainly, almost everybody has some form of, I suppose, sensory preferences, every single person. And certainly over the last, I'd say 3 years, a lot more emphasis has been on sensory strategies.
And training
yeah.
staff as well.
So we have a training and obviously providing training to the staff on the floor. But what more and more of our admissions are coming in with their own sort of strategies in place. So it's been identified, which is I always find is really helpful. Or people are managing the sensory environment themselves, but they don't know it. So they've gone and bought their own headphones because they find like loud noises uncomfortable. Or they say, I really like this smell, so I bought a diffuser and I buy, this essential oil. And they don't necessarily realise it's a sensory strategy they're implementing. Some people don't know, and I find it's some of the best engagement because once everybody likes to be pampered, don't they, a little bit? And so when, you're talking about what makes somebody comfortable and what makes them feel physically better as well, once you get that buy-in, then the engagement's great and it can be good fun exploring all the different...
And I think it's got easier within Cygnet because of the level of training that we've been provided. We've got like the sensory modulation training, you've got the sensory perceptorship that you can work through now. It's all sensory, something that we do touch upon at university, but again, you touch upon it. So having that greater kind of understanding of it really helps you apply it within your service line.
And I suppose the links to the other OTs that are sensory integration trained who can come and support that is helpful, isn't it? I suppose one of the things that we should mention, a bit of an elephant in the room, if you like, is personality disorder services often get negative perceptions around them and around people working in those services and the people that are using those services. Is there something that you would like people to know in terms of maybe things feeling a little bit different to what they might expect? Or the positives to some of those preconceived ideas that people might have?
I think realistically, it is a complex area to work in. I'm not going to try and hide that, but it's also a very rewarding area to work in. You have individuals that are very willing. They want to get to know you. They want to work with you. They want to show you what they can do. They want to try and avoid the things that they can't. So, with that trust that you build with them, you can really help them progress. It's like with many jobs, it has its benefits and it has its difficulties. For me, I've been in that service line for around about 10 years. I thoroughly enjoy it. It's each to their own, isn't it?
There's an awful lot of stigma, and I think I didn't realise how much until I worked within the services, because I'd worked in mental health services before, and then you really start to see it. And so it is unfair, a lot of the stuff that people face, and working with that is difficult, and it becomes almost like part of the challenges you face, and you're working together with the individual to overcome the stigma a lot of the times. So I certainly wouldn't let it put people off. It was a lot more rewarding than I think people might think, and certainly my perception of working in both forensic services and rehab is that they're just normal people who have had, difficult situations and circumstances. And when you get to know them, they're just, like I said, they're just normal people. They're really nice people who want to engage in society, but sometimes really struggle. And so it's just helping them with that and reopening doors which may have been closed. But also, on the flip side of the stigma, you've got to be, I think, prepared if you're going to work in personality disorder services to advocate against the stigma. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things we had really positive, I thought, at Aspen Clinic was we had paramedic students come and spend a few days with us, because as frontline staff, paramedics probably see a lot of people who've self-harmed or maybe put themselves in dangerous situations, and they quite openly said that they had no idea, and that we didn't realise that people had gone through what they'd gone through, and their situations. And they said it really changed their perception of from when they were going out in the ambulance and responding to different scenarios.
So that stereotypical, their attention seeking is something you hear a lot of. And, actually what they are doing is they're care seeking because of some of their difficulties. Yeah, you get a lot of that, don't you? But I mean, at the end of the day, that is someone's mum, dad, brother, sister, aunt, uncle. The thing that sticks in my mind the most working in that area is how that person presents on admission and how they leave with a smile when they walk out on that discharge day. You see the very clear differences there, and that is what is rewarding about it.
And the relationships, which I mentioned earlier, because, like I say, they're just people, nice people.
So, Adam, we talked a little bit about the model earlier, and I know it's something that you were able to work with other disciplines to design so that they all fit together as a whole. Do you want to tell us how that was developed?
So it was through the steering group. So, Lindsay, you mentioned the model of care, and we had a sort of basic model of care, which the psychology department, I think, had started. And then I suppose what we were looking at is where the occupational therapy side fit in. And so in the process in our model of, from admission to assessment to stabilisation, treatment, discharge, what would occupational therapy look like? So, earlier you asked the question around what does OT look like for someone coming into the service? So it was designed so it fit with the model of care, and it would work alongside what the psychologists were doing, what the nurses were doing, what the medics were looking at. Because, certainly it's my opinion that OT work incredibly closely with psychology in personality disorder services, certainly in regards to coping skills. As I suppose both disciplines, do their own work on coping skills, but ultimately it's us who give it the real world experience, or try to, and by our use of community and environments and finding the right environment, which in the community can be incredibly challenging to find. But equally, it's that environment that person needs to put those skills and those coping strategies into place, and having that safety if it doesn't quite go right, that you can go back or you can try something different, which ultimately comes into our activity analysis and all of our other great unique skills.
So when we think about that, the model of practice that you're referring to, with every OT that joins our service line, that is one of the things that they will learn about. So I'll arrange an induction with them. I'll talk them through that model that we use within our service line and what the pathways should look like, to try and support them at their own service, and to ensure that we still have that uniformed approach that we spoke about earlier.
It's really important, isn't it, to capture all of that, and then people can see what those expectations are. So did you have any ambition to be an author, Lindsay, or was that something that just crept up on you?
It's something which crept up on me on my first ever clinical lead meeting, funnily enough. We talked about the possibility of writing a book. Obviously, this is my first meeting and I'm still learning about the process, not wanting to get anything wrong. So that was something I took back with me, thinking, right, I've got a period of time in which this needs to be complete. What is the best way of me completing it? At this stage, I was getting to know the team a lot more, was able to recognise, very clear strengths within the service line. I think there was 10 potential topics that needed to be covered within the chapter. So I brought that down into 2, and then looked for 5 staff where I think the strengths laid, and got them to write around them. Adam being one of them, myself being one of them, and other staff members.
Is that something that you both enjoyed?
Yeah, I mean, now, yeah, definitely. I mean, at the time, it's a tad anxiety provoking, I'll be honest, but it's something I'm pleased to have done.
Yeah, something proud to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things when you're at uni, you think, I'll write journals and I'd like to contribute to chapters of books, and then you start working and you think, gosh, I've not got time to do anything like that. So, yeah, to have the opportunity was nice. And
Did it help just to reflect on the journey that the service line's been through and be able to think about where it's going next? Was it useful to pull all of that together?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's like it's all them pieces to the puzzle that finally come together, and you almost you think, oh, this is brilliant. You actually see it, but you see it in paper and over a number of pages, and helps with the the ongoing motivation levels, doesn't it?
To see what you've actually done, because it was, I suppose, it's something that I started and then I think Lindsay's taken over from, and I suppose you don't realise how much work you're doing until you see it, if that makes sense, because you're just doing bit by bit, and
And then you pull it all together and see it as a whole.
Yeah.
You can really see where that progress is, can't you? That's great, thank you.